Because almost nobody could he enter the Holy of Holies. In 7 visual tests, you will understand why access was prohibited. The Holy of Holies was not a distant myth. It was aerial space with measurements, layers, and purpose. We'll see point 7 visual tests which make this clear: presence, purity, architecture, consequence, environment, name, protection. When we talk about the Holy of Holies, many people imagine a distant, almost abstract mystery, something too religious to touch practical life. But what was there was a space, real, with location, measurements, and a specific route to reach the center. From the outer courtyard to the innermost core, every step was carefully considered to slow the heart rate and prepare the mind. It wasn't a place for lucky people, but a pedagogical approach about how to approach what is sacred without trampling on its meaning. The journey began in the courtyard, where the people gathered, continued through the holy place, where few served, and finally arrived at the Holy of Holies, where only one could enter, once a year. This movement wasn't about distance, but about intentionality. Don't rush to the center without first learning how to get there. It's like when you turn down the volume, breathe, and prepare yourself before discussing something that truly matters. Space taught not only where enter, but as to enter. We understand this principle every day, even without realizing it. Airports have restricted areas, hospitals have sterile rooms, safes have protocols, not to exclude, but to protect the values saved. Different environments require different preparation. It's not about hierarchy, it's about responsibility. The more essential something is, the greater the care that must be taken to prevent it from being contaminated, trivialized, or violated. Therefore, the temple map was not just decoration, it was care method. Without process, experience becomes shock. Without preparation, encounter becomes rupture. When we ignore the path, we lose meaning and wound what should heal. Before asking why was it forbidden, the temple answers, because love without preparation turns into harm. But in the end, what made the Holy of Holies so different from any other room? The Holy of Holies was not an empty room awaiting imagination. It was described as the meeting point, the place where the presence manifested itself among the cherubim above the mercy seat. This means that the center was not the object, but their relationship. It wasn't a monument to look at, it was a space to listen to. The barrier, then, did not have the function of separating, but of protect quality of this meeting. Without limits, what is profound dissolves into the commonplace and loses what makes it unique. When a meeting is precious, we naturally create context. An important conversation doesn't happen in the middle of the hallway. If you've ever sought silence to discuss something serious, you already understand this principle intuitively. The sacred did not compete with the noise. I was asking for attention. The barrier didn't say, "Don't enter." It said, "Enter the right way." And this is not far from our reality. When someone keeps a letter, a photo, a special memory, it's not left on the living room table for just anyone to pick up. Value demands care, and care creates boundaries. The presence was not fragile, was the human that needed to be prepared for the meeting. Without this preparation, the experience would cease to be an encounter and would become a raw impact, lacking the structure to be received. It's like very bright light for eyes that have just emerged from darkness, not because the light is bad, but because the eyes need to adjust. The barrier protected humanity from haste and immediacy, and he remembered that depth cannot be forced, if cultivate, but to get in, desire alone wasn't enough. There was a process. Access to the Holy of Holies took place only once a year and not in an improvised manner. There was a purification, script baths, specific clothing, sacrifices, and incense. Not as ceremonial theatre, but as alignment process between the internal and the external. Before entering, the body and the heart needed to say the same thing. This is no different from what we see in an operating room. Before access, there is washing, dressing, sterilization, not for status, but for care. It's not that the doctor is better, it's that life there is, too sensitive to be dealt with urgently. In the Holy of Holies, the principle was the same. Don't bring noise into situations where precision is needed. Ritual purity did not shield God, because God is not fragile. She protected the person so that the meeting would not be destructive, confusing, or tainted by distraction. When the process is respected, there is depth, stability, and meaning. When ignored, the person themselves puts themselves in a position to react, an exhibition that cannot be sustained. The preparation wasn't about earning to get in, but about don't miss the meeting. Without preparation, even something good can overwhelm us, because we lack the structure to receive it. The ritual taught that depth doesn't happen by impulse, but by attention built. In the Holy of Holies, care was the first sign of reverence. But even with preparation, there was a physical barrier which marked the core. Let's see why. The shape of the Holy of Holies was a perfect cube-equal height, width, and length. This symmetry wasn't aesthetic, it was architectural language used to say, here everything is whole. While the outside world is full of variations, pressures, and movements, the cube communicated stability. It was a place where time seemed to stand still, slow down, inviting the heart to enter into a different rhythm, but the cube was only the inner part. The veil-it formed the separation between the holy place and the Holy of Holies, functioning as the final layer of protection. It was not a decorative curtain, but a symbolic and physical barrier, like a wall of silence before the core. Passing through it meant crossing the boundary between the ordinary and the essential. If you think about a safe modern, a data server or a control room will recognize the same principle. The more valuable the content, the more layers of protection are needed to access it, not to hide it, but to prevent the value from being corrupted, trivialized, or exposed without preparation. The temple's architecture already taught this logic long before of modern engineering. Without the veil, the core would be invaded by the chaotic flow of the courtyard, noise, footsteps, haste, distraction. With the veil, the core remained. Consistent with its function as a meeting place, the barrier was not a blockage, but a filter, a precaution, a necessary adjustment. The cube said, here everything is whole, and the veil said, arrive in one piece as well. But what if someone crossed the line? Let's respect these layers. Uzzah's story is one of the most uncomfortable because it confronts us with real limits. In trying to prevent the ark from falling, he touched it with his own hand, crossing a functional boundary that should not have been crossed. It wasn't punishment for malicious intent, it was a direct consequence of ignoring the correct way to deal with the sacred. Just as high-voltage electricity is not inherently bad, but dangerous without preparation, the sacred demands protocol. It's natural to think, but he only wanted to help. Yes, and that's the point. Good intentions are no substitute for preparation. When the value is high, acting without guidance can cause harm to the value itself and to the person trying to protect it. We see this in the simplest, everyday situations. No one touches a running turbine, no one enters an examination room without protection, and no one adjusts live wires without proper equipment. Not because these environments are bad, but because they are too intense for direct contact. The intention may be good, but the consequence is objective. Uzzah's story doesn't teach fear, but respect for the order of things. Limits exist to protect humans, not to humiliate or alienate them. When we ignore processes, we transform what should illuminate into something that hurts. The Holy of Holies taught care is the mature form of love. So how did the environment help ensure that the meeting went as planned? Upon entering the Holy of Holies, the high priest did not see the space as an open hall. A cloud of incense, it filled the room, softening the light and limiting visibility. This detail wasn't aesthetic, it was a sensory buffer so that the encounter would not be abrupt, overwhelming, or disorienting. The environment was prepared for the person to enter, with stability, not with a shock. Furthermore, the blood sprinkled on the mercy seat symbolized reconciliation, cleansing, and restoration of the relationship. It wasn't a theatrical gesture, but a marking of a spiritual state, a reminder that the meeting was not happening by right, but by grace. The whole atmosphere said, enter with awareness, enter with humility, enter with care. It was a space built for reduce internal noise, not to generate external impact. If you've ever seen a room affair control in a laboratory or surgical center, you know this principle. It is necessary to control particles, temperature, flow, silence, light, everything to allow precision. It's not about luxury, but about protection of that which is delicate and central. The temple was doing this centuries before we called it engineering or science. The atmosphere created suggested that encountering the sacred is not about rushing, improvising, or spectacle. It's a space you enter slowly, attentively, leaving everything external outside. When the environment is aligned, the heart canto perceive, to listen and to respond with depth. The Holy of Holies taught, to see what is essential, you need to create the right environment. But even the language, there were limits. Not everything could be said everywhere. In the Holy of Holies, the tetragrammaton, the name, was pronounced only there by a single person in a single day. This did not mean hiding God, but keep the meaning, so that the word would not be reduced to a slogan. Names open doors, just as a password unlocks a safe. A word can open or violate a meaning. Therefore, the name was treated not as a code, but ASCII. When a word becomes too common, it loses its density. When everything is said in any context, nothing remains meaningful. The limitation of pronouncing the name taught that not all truth fits in every room. There are words that require silence, listening, intention, and alignment of the heart before they are spoken. Language can reveal, but it can also wear what you should keep. We experience this clearly today. A special memory loses its power when it's recounted haphazardly to just anyone without time or commitment. The meaning doesn't disappear, it empties because it was exposed carelessly. The name in the Holy of Holies protected the meaning before its exposure. The verbal limit wasn't censorship, it was noise protection. He prevented the sacred from becoming propaganda, a tool of power, or religious jargon. Speaking the name there, and not just anywhere, was acknowledging that depth cannot be improvised. The Holy of Holies taught, words also have their proper place. But there was still one last limit. Protecting the sacred from becoming something else, weapon or spectacle. Limiting access to the Holy of Holies not only protected the person, it also protected the symbol of being kidnapped for human interests. If anyone could enter, touch, show, display, or narrate the core of the sacred, it would quickly become transformed into a trophy, and everything that should inspire reverence would become a banner of contention. The limit existed to prevent the sacred was used as power. Every community runs the risk of turning faith into spectacle. The saint becomes marketing. The symbol becomes an argument. Devotion becomes a stage. When this happens, the heart stops seeking presence and begins to seek advantage. The barrier prevented the Holy of Holies from being displayed as a monument or political legitimizer. What was meant to heal could not be used for master. We see this today through ideas, memories, symbols, and even words. When something sacred is exposed without filter, it loses its meaning and becomes consumer item or dispute. Limits preserve the whole value, preventing it from being shaped according to vanity, prestige, or control. Protecting the Holy of Holies was, in the end, to protect the people from themselves. The faith that transforms is the one that descends to the heart, not the one who climbs onto the platform. The boundary restricted access to maintain the sacred as an experience, not as a tool. By preventing the spectacle, the mystery, silence, and depth of the encounter were preserved. The Holy of Holies taught, what is holy is not possessed, it is received. If all of this is true, how can we apply it today without living in a temple? The Holy of Holies is not just an ancient story, it is a care method applicable today, because even without a physical temple, we still have things that need to be protected from the noise, faith, silence, convictions, bonds, rest. If any person, news item, or emergency enters without criteria, the valuable it disperses. The first step, then, is to ask, what in my day is sacred enough to be protected? Next comes the criterion, the equivalent of the courtyard, the saint, and the Holy of Holies in practical life. Not every topic is suitable for every moment. Not every conversation is for every person, and not every delivery is for every time. Creating healthy boundaries isn't about building walls. It's to protect the correct use of attention. What is valuable grows when it is careful, and it is lost when it is exposed without measure. In practice, this could mean establishing quiet hours, moments without screens, pauses to breathe, limits in discussions that don't build anything. It could involve setting aside some time each day to reflect, listen, read, pray, and think without rushing or interruption. Nothing profound can be sustained by a constant flow of stimuli. Sacred needs space, time, and intention. You don't need a priest, an ancient room, or a complex ritual, but you need to decide what cannot be affected by the rush of the day. Ultimately, protecting the saint isn't about isolating, it's about to allow meaning to remain alive. The Holy of Holies continues to speak. What is profound is kept safe so that it may bear fruit. What limit will you set this week? And to protect what? There comes a point where theory and image meet, when you realize that the veil, the cube, the incense, the name, and the silence, they weren't just rules, they were careful. Be careful that the meeting doesn't turn into a spectacle. Care was taken to ensure that what was essential was not crushed by the noise. Care was taken to ensure that the sacred was not used, but received. Now imagine, just for a moment, the veil being pierced by a single beam of amber light, descending slowly to the mercy seat, as if the impossible touched the possible. No rush, no noise. There is no audience, there is no speech, there is no victory, only presence. Boundaries don't separate us. Boundaries allow for encounters, because love doesn't invade. Love, it arrives when it is welcomed. We saw 7 visual test presents: purity, architecture, consequence, environment, name, and protection. Together, they show that the Holy of Holies was not made to keep people away. It was made to save the meeting. Setting limits isn't punishment. It's care structure so that what is essential does not get lost in the noise. If something is valuable, it needs method, environment, and time. Only in this way does it remain alive. The Holy of Holies continues to teach us to create boundaries that preserve meaning. When we respect the journey, the encounter ceases to be a clash and becomes communion. What is holy cannot be controlled if you receive. And only those who learn how to arrive with preparation, it achieves, remain. If you see the Bible on the body, it helps you. Sign up and set a reminder. A new episode of the series every week. Inside, in the video on the screen, you will understand why did the ark disappear from the scene, and what does this reveal about the protection of the sacred. Click now and see the clues on the screen.